Welcome back to part 3 of Reviving the Body. Today we're going to talk about chairs, and we're going to talk about helping fix your low back pain, hip pain, upper body pain, posture, and all that stuff. Most likely, most of you are sitting at a desk most of the day or driving in a car. Today we're going to address all that stuff and give you some options to how to fix some of the pain, free up a little bit of space, and be able to create more movement in your everyday life. If you haven't watched part 1 or part 2, just click the links right up there. I'll have them supplied, and I'll also have them in the description. But welcome, Nadine. Thanks for joining us in the part 3 today. Let's see, what are we going to talk? We're talking a little bit about what happens when we sit in these chairs, right? All right, so when I'm sitting in this chair, and you got this really funky chair thing going on that looks really cool, but if I'm sitting in a normal chair, if I'm driving, my hips are stuck at 90 degrees, my knees are stuck at 90 degrees, and I spend all day here typing away. And what happens is the body adjusts, right? The body adjusts to the position that we're at, which is great. And if you're unsure about that, when you watch a Tour de France rider get off a bicycle, after a couple hours, they usually get off the bike and they're in this position. They're in that position because the position they were on the bike, the body is adapting, and we're shortening the psoas for maximum performance for what they do. But sitting in a chair is not maximizing any performance whatsoever. It's going to allow our body to tighten up, and when we have a tight psoas, we're going to have a long hamstring that's going to start pulling onto the hip because the hip is not mobile. We talked about the push and pull on part 2, and that's exactly it. If my hip is being short and we're creating pull, we're going to get a push on the hamstring or vice versa. So we're going to try and counteract that the best that we can. What we have here is a sleek form Austin chair, and we have these in the gym because they are awesome. And we're all about movement. So if you notice, the angle of her hip is not at 90 degrees. This is now allowing less stretch onto the psoas, so it's a little bit longer, giving a little bit more balance to the hamstring and to the back and the glutes. And at the same time, her knee is tucked. So this quad versus my quad that's stuck in this position and contracting right now, if I tuck my feet, I'm now lengthening this. And when I lengthen this entire quad, I'm also going to be pulling and lengthening this psoas. So it's going to work twofold when we're in this type of chair. As well as the second, if she's standing upright and she wants to lean forward and hunch the back, or sitting down. Did I say sand? Yeah. I'm sorry. Yeah. I'm just making, she does a good job. I can't say the right instruction. So if she tries to lean forward like she's at her desk and actually lean your body forward, what's going to happen is the chair is going to slightly shift, but she still maintains the posture. It's very hard for her to just kind of slightly roll the entire body and still do and actually type at the desk. Yeah. So that's why we were a big fan of these chairs, because it does allow less tension onto the psoas and gets the quad to be stretched that we don't do enough of, okay? And why is this important, and how does this relate to our fitness in general? Well, when we have a tight psoas, I'm going to get rid of this chair now. I'm going to stand up. When we get rid of a tight psoas, we can see improvement into our running. We can see an improvement into our squat. We can see an improvement in the overall function of our body. When we have a short psoas, and I'm going to have Nadine turn sideways, and we are walking, so you just take one step forward, what's going to happen is this psoas is forward, and let's take another step forward. And when we steps, this psoas has to be stretched. Right here, the psoas has to be stretched. If we have a tight psoas, this is going to make our gait very small. And it's going to force her body into a forward leaning position because this hip doesn't open up. Now, if we stretch the psoas out, bring your leg a little bit further behind you for a second, and the body's going to still be upright, and now we're getting more of a stretch of that psoas. So if we put her hands in a runner's position, and then we pick the back leg up, we're going to have the stride of us running in general. And what we want to make sure is that body is centered the best it can. We're slightly leaning forward, which is okay. And you can kind of see as she leans forward, this leg is coming forward, so her psoas is a little bit tight, just like everyone else's. Mine's tight, everyone's psoas is really tight. So if we can improve the stretch of this psoas, what's going to happen is, you can totally rest your hand on my shoulder if you need to hold in balance, is that this leg is going to come back here a little bit further, and her body's going to stay upright. The further the stride that we have, the more we can push off and the more fluid we become. But if she stays short and this is her gait, and having this body now lean forward, what's going to happen is we're going to get all this pain that's kicking up in here, kicking up in the side of the body here as well, and we're going to feel that pain when we're running and relax. So if you have pain while you run in your lower back, a lot of the times it's due to that tight psoas that's not allowing your gait to really open up. Maybe your stride is very small and you're doing more of a shuffle step when you're running. A lot of that can be tied to the psoas. The other thing that it's tied to is going to be the ankle, which we're going to tackle in our next video, of how important the ankle mobility is as well with the psoas. And if we can fix both or just start working on both, we're going to see a huge improvement into our box jumps, into our running, into our walking, into the pain of our body, to everything that we're doing. And we're going to feel like we're freer on a day-to-day basis. But the big thing we're going to talk about, because the biggest change we can make for you guys, is to adjust that psoas. So how do we stretch that psoas out? I know there's tons of different ways. We have, for instance, we could lay on a lacrosse ball, which is really good. We could find our belly button, we go in 1 inch right, 1 inch down, and we lay on that lacrosse ball and we work that lacrosse ball back and forth. Creates a little bit of sensory to the body, and when we create that sensory response, that's connecting the mind-muscle connection, which we talked about, and it's going to release a little bit of that tension, or we roll that out and then we create some tension into the psoas, like a hip raise. And now we fire that muscle up and the mind-muscle connection is flowing well because we created sensory touch to trigger the mind-muscle connection. But that's not good enough. We need to not only stretch the psoas out, but we also have to activate it, right? Just stretching it out is great to just relieve pain, but it's not going to fully fix the function because the brain is not going to tie in the fact that we have to use the muscle and move and load the psoas if it doesn't have the mind-muscle connection to load it. We have the mind-muscle connection of stretching it to relieve it, but the second that we load it, the body is going to compensate and go back to the low back, go back to pulling on all the things we don't want to pull on. So one of the first movements that we can do, and the easiest one that we can do, is a half kneeling lunge. All right, so I'm going to have Nadine face me. She's going to take a half kneeling position. And the focus right here from the get-go is we want these toes tucked. We want I'm going to show you a front view of this. We want to make sure that the hip is directly over the knee, so we're not shifted here, we're not shifted out here. We have this all in line. Next, what we want to do is make sure that we activate the muscles of the glutes. I'm just going to pull this up a little bit. We're going to squeeze the glute, and we're going to push the hip forward, so we feel a stretch up in here. We feel the glute firing. These are the two things you have to have working and feeling before we initiate that movement. You have to. And the entire time, this is all you're focusing on. You're not focusing on the front leg. You're focusing all on the glute contraction and the stretch of the psoas. And when we feel that, we are now going to drive this knee directly forward, and the heel can come up. It can come up, but we're just relaxing the knee for the body forward, keeping our torso upright, and she should still feel the glute contracting, right? Do we feel the psoas stretch? Good. And then we're going to shift the body back. Nice. And like we talked about in the last video, we want a push and pull. So she is going to create tension in the psoas on that side as she's shifting forward, trying to squeeze the glute hard, feeling the stretch of the psoas. And at the same time, when she's pushing off this and pushing the knee back, she's just not shooting back. She's slowly creating tension, still in there, right? We're still squeezing the glute, stretching the psoas when we move back. Now we're creating activation of the muscle. Now what we are doing is telling the body, hey, When I do this type of motion, I want to make sure that we're loading the psoas, and I want to use the glute. If you feel this in the back, or you're going too far and, let's say, lean back really far into this, and as you go through the lunge. As you lean back here, you might feel the disc compress, and that tension in our spine where we're like, oh, those are the muscles. No, we're just going to the end range motion of our spine. And when we go to the end range motion of our spine, we're not doing ourselves any justice. We're relaxing the core up front here as well. So it is very crucial that we just take this slow. What we usually say is about 5 on each side with a couple seconds of tempo. Then we're going to switch that up. So I'll have you just switch that up. So we're going to have the toes tucked. We're going to have the hip. Once again, that hip is going to be in line with that knee. Squeeze the glute. Shift the body slightly forward to feel the psoas kick in. Torso stays upright. Drive the front knee forward. That toe, that heel can lift off in the front. And then shift back. Now, if your body slightly leans forward as you shift, so lean forward when you shift forward. Yep, as you shift forward, lean forward. But you can still feel the psoas and the glute. That's okay. We're learning. And come back. And that's part of the process. You can come up out of there. That's part of the process of us doing that, okay? You're not going to have a perfect rep on rep 1, and you're not going to have a perfect rep on rep 10. It might take you a couple days of practices to start feeling it out and start feeling it opening up, and maybe the toes that are curled behind us kind of hurt. Use some padding if you need, but you need to have those toes tucked. We're going to tackle the toes, we're going to tackle the ankle and all that other stuff in another video, which is super important too. But this is the best way that we can start seeing some change in any pain that we have here, we have bilateral across the back, and all those positions that we usually feel from sitting down, from driving all day, from a tight psoas. But say we get really good at that, we want to load up a little bit more weight. I'm going to have you grab that box, Nadine, for me, please. We can take the next step to get better at this. And this is when we're going to start talking about split squats. Now, if you don't have a good balance left to right or more stability in the body, feel free to grab a PVC pipe or something to hold on to in your hand that allows you to do this movement. But we're going to do the same thing that we just did with the box elevated. So we're going to put a foot up, and this time we're going to kick the foot back a little bit further. We are going to start on the toe. So I want her high on that toe. So I want that leg back a little bit further. We're going to bring that back further. A little balancing act as well too. This can be a little bit tough for everyone. We're going to try and go high up on that toe. And our focus right now is to lock that entire leg out. Lock the knee out. And when we lock the knee out, we should feel the stretch of the psoas. And at the same time, squeeze that glute. So we're in the same position, but we went from a kneeling position to obviously a standing position. Same thing happens. She's just sliding this knee forward. When we get to the point where the body wants to lean forward, we're going to stop. We're going to then add the bend into the knee while we continue to travel forward and bend the knee as we need, the back knee, keeping the glute squeezed and feeling the stretch of the psoas. And then we're going to slowly push back. We're going to go to a locked out leg and stay on the toe. Excellent job, Nadine. Let's work through a couple more of those. Stay upright, glute squeeze, feel the stretch of the psoas, sink that body forward. Notice how her heel is coming up. That's awesome. She's got good range of motion up here. And then she's going to push back, lock that leg out, squeeze the glute, feel the psoas. Before you initiate the movement and when you finish the movement, your focus is toes, knee locked out, psoas stretched, activated, and glute squeezed. Those things. All this leg is doing is just guiding you. Don't think about the lunge on the front leg. It should be all on the back leg, and relax. Cool. So that's step 2 to kick it up a notch. As always, we say do about 5 reps on each side, do 3 to 5 sets, anywhere in between there. Take it super slow in your entire focus. I can't stress this enough. The entire time that movement is going on, you only move within the range that allows your glute to be contracted the entire time and feeling the stretch and the activation of the psoas on the front side. It'll be high up on the hip up here. That psoas, and I just want to clarify this, connects on the front side of our spine here and connects all the way down, crosses over the hip into our femur. So this is like anytime you're picking the knee up, that's going to be psoas, okay? toes to bar, knees to chest, toes to space, running, walking, hiking, all this stuff is using that psoas. And the more that we sit in it, the tighter it gets. It does get strong, but it creates a lot of tension in the hamstring. So if you have really tight hamstrings, it's because your hamstrings are long and weak because the psoas is tight. So we have that because of that anterior pelvic tilt. And I'm going to show a side view. So if her hips are, I'm just going to have you put your arms up there. So if her shirt or her waistline is set like this, like the sweatshirt is, then it usually is telling the way of the hip. So what we want to try and do is tuck the belly button up, which is going to lift this up and create a level pelvis. All right, so we have an even stretch onto the quad and psoas, even stretch on the hamstring. But when the hips rotate down and we kind of push your butt back, we're going to have an extension right into here. So this back is going to compress and we're going to feel an elongated hamstring. And relax. That elongated hamstring is the thing that's going to poke you and say, hey, my hamstrings are tight. You're going to go to everybody from a doctor and say, hey, I have tight hamstrings, I have this. They're going to talk about the hamstrings, they're going to talk about the low back, and they're never ever going to address the psoas. I don't want to say never ever, but I'm going to say never ever. Sorry, not sorry. But they're not going to even look at the psoas for most people. And that is the antagonist, or you have the agonist and the antagonist, the opposite muscle that's causing a lot of that issue, even though the pain is in the hamstring and the stretch is in the hamstring. But as soon as we feel that stretch in the hamstring constantly, we can usually start seeing some pain coming in the glute and the lower back. And that all ties into part 1 of our video that we talked about mobile and stable joints. When this is not mobile and these muscles aren't mobile in the hip, it's going to rob from a stable joint and it's going to create pain into the lower back and or into the upper glutes and stuff like that. So there's 2 options that we have. We just showed you that half kneeling lunge going into those box elevated lunges. And the goal is to work to an ATG split squat, which is an ass to grass split squat. So our goal is to try and bring the glute all the way to the heel of the front leg while we keep the back knee off. So Nadine's going to give a good ATG right here. So we're going to go in a wide stance and nothing changes from the box. So we're going to still be on the toe, still knees going to be locked out, glute, psoas, and she's just going to keep the torso upright the best that she can. If it leans forward, it's not the end of the world. Don't worry, we're learning. And we're going to drive that knee forward. We're feeling that stretch. And when she feels like her body's going to shift forward, she's going to bend that back knee. And she can continue to bend that back knee, continue to bend that back knee. Good. And sink forward. Good. And then we're going to come up out of that. Good. And let's do one more. Glute squeeze, legs locked out on the toe, psoas stretch. We're just going to melt that front foot forward. Be very lackadaisical on the front leg, trying to get our glute down to the heel. So the heel is going to come up on the front foot, trying to keep the back knee off. Oh, yeah. We feel that, Nadine? I know you do. And come up out of there. And heck yeah, and relax. Those are tough. Give them a try. They're super beneficial. And I promise you, you start doing these a couple times a week. I would say at a minimum of 3 to 4 times a week of just knocking out sets of 5 of them. You're going to start feeling a lot better in those hips. Like I said, we're going to see an improvement on your box jumps, improvement on your run, walking, sitting, driving. We're going to relieve a lot of that tension. So make sure you like, subscribe to our podcast. This is our YouTube, our podcast, social media. Get on it. We push out content everywhere. This is part 3 of that Reviving Your Body. We got 2 more parts coming out, so stay tuned and let us know what you think.